going to talk about the introduction of the German historical school. There was an earlier historical school that included B. Hildebrand and Karl Nies, but the German historical school reached the pinnacle of its development in the late 19th century with the works of Gustav Schmoller. Some other members of the German historical school during this period were L. Brentano and G. F. Knapp. The German historical school exists in the mid-19th century with the publications of Friedrich List and Wilhelm Roscher, and ended in 1917 when Gustav Schmoller died, as a reaction to the growing ideas of laissez-faire that spread largely in Europe at the time. It explicitly rejected economics that was practiced by British classical school of Ricardo and Mill. Certain key economic institutions of 19th century Germany differed substantially from those of Britain. It is not surprising that a different economic ideology arose. British theories were obviously inapplicable to the German situation. The historical school emerged as a result of several intellectual influences, especially Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The success of evolutionary thinking led many thinkers, including Karl Marx, as well as the members of the historical school, to seek an evolutionary form of economic theory to contrast with the static theories of neoclassical economics. The historical school critics of neoclassical economics objected to its atomistic and deductive nature as well as its static nature. They wanted a theory that tied the development of economies to a social, political, and cultural background. The emergence of the German historical school resulted from the 19th century breakdown of the pet project of the 17th century natural law philosophers and the 18th century Enlightenment philosophers. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant had undermined the philosophical foundations of the Enlightenment project by pointing out that pure reason would not achieve this goal. In the case of law, Kant himself had tried to show a way out by pointing out how restricting oneself to a few fundamental principles or concepts. The post-Kantian metaphysical and historical strands in 19th century German thought were not wholly separate. We find them often overlapping and fused, most famously in the work of the influential philosopher George W. F. Hegel, where history is interpreted as revealing some essential underlying idea or principle over time. The ideas of the German historical school spread to other countries in the late 19th century, at a time when many young foreigners came to German universities for graduate study. It was highly influential in Italy, which is the Lombardo-Venetian school, and the United States, the American new generation in the 1870s to 90s, can be regarded as direct offshoots of the German historical school. The English and French historicists, by contrast, drew from a wider range of influence, but can be drawn together by a common approach.
Today I'm going to talk about the main principle in the German historical school, which is there are four main principles in the thinking of the German historical economy. Number one is evolutionary approach to economics. Applied a dynamic evolutionary perspective in its study of society, concentrated on cumulative development and growth. Analogy sometimes drawn to Darwin's evolutionism in biology by saying born, develop, grows, finally decays and dies. Society is constantly changing. What is relevant economic doctrine for one country at a particular time may be irrelevant for another country or at another age. This relativistic approach was especially useful in attacking classical economics as being unsuitable for Germany. Number two is emphasis on the positive role of government. German historical school was nationalistic, while classical economy was individualistic and cosmopolitan. The state of Germany fostered industry, transportation, and economic growth. In the process of defending a unified economy, it was easy to develop an ardent nationalistic glorification of the state. Historical school gave great prominence to the need for the state intervention in economic affairs and stressed that the community has interests of its own that are quite distinct from those of the individual. Number three is inductive or historical approach. Emphasizes the importance of studying the economy inductively historical, for example, like from part to the world. Because academic and other social phenomena are interdependent, political economy can be treated adequately except in combination with other branches of social science. The historical school claimed that its historical method allowed it to study all the forces of the economic phenomenon. Today, the historical inductive method has become generally accepted as complementary to marginalist abstract deductive method. The last one is advocacy of conservative reform. Political economy must not merely analyze motives that prompt economic activity but must weigh merit of this action and their outcomes. It must determine a standard of the proper production and distribution of wealth so that the demand are satisfied. German historical school promote moderate reform that frustrated the drive for a more radical democratization of so by socialists. Instead of the poor and lowly fighting each other, they will stay loyal nationalism and serve to the state were more widespread in Germany.
I will present the German Historical School about major contribution to theory and teaching. German Historical School benefit their member. First, them enjoying to close and friendly relation with government official to presiding the academic life. Second, professor maker are the term that they use as the German government controlled all the universities and scholars. And this school also helped German imperial government by defending its role in rationalistic state. Economy historical serve the proceeding in business, financial, and landowning group by fostering moderate reform that fosters the drive for more radical democratization of society. This result as servility, nationalism, and loyalty to the government more intensive in the German than anywhere else. The poor and lowly fighting and winning their own battle for improvement, concessions were given to them by a paternalistic. The inductive method of the historical has been generally accepted as complementary to the abstract deductive approach. First, changing in procedure and time conservancies have forced into on age but tolerable place marriage. Example, complementary econometric analysis normally incorporate both abstract theorizing and empirical testing. Economists normally find for the most updated historical data can be used to test their theory as opposite to consider data clearly from the distant past. If society is constantly changed and if new signal call for analysis, then the experience have only limited relevance. Its attack on laissez-faire. First, members of the school acknowledge that unrestricted free enterprise unnecessarily produce the best possible result for society as a whole. They were right in their trust that reform can be substituted for worse upheaval brought by sharpening class distinctions. And the last, German nationalists advocated by historical economists over itself as its development into fantasist militarism. That's all for me. Thank you.
Now I will talk about the forerunner of the German historical school. Friedrich List and Wilhelm Roscher were the forerunner of the German historical school. Friedrich's lifespan is from 1789 to 1846. List probably known for his critique of free trade, but he is actually a much broader thinker than that. And in fact, he was the first economist to have a really good understanding of increasing returns and economic growth. Wilhelm Rocher lifespan is start from 1817 to 1894. He was one of the founders of the German Historical School. This group wanted to supplement classical theory, whereas the younger school wished to substitute it entirely with historical studies and policy consideration. Next is Gustav Smaller. Gustav Smaller lifespan is start from 1838 until 1917. Gustav Smaller was the leading figure of the younger historical school. He was a professor of political science at Halle, Strasbourg, and Berlin. He taught many generations of students and administration officials, and also wielded great influence in academic, and government circles. Next is Max Weber. Max Weber's lifespan is started from 1864 until 1920. He established himself in Berlin's legal professions. He considered himself as intellectual descendants of Smaller.
The German Historical School may be said to have ended with the death of Smaller. Its methodology and perspective were carried on beyond that time by another, particularly by Werner Sombart, 1863 until 1941. Sombart, an economy historian, questioned Weber's thesis as Puritanism had a large share in forming the capitalist spirit of businessmen. Instead, he stated that those parts of the Puritans' dogma which appear to be of real importance for the formation of the spirit of capitalists are borrowed from the real of idea of Jewish religion. It was Jew, said Sombart, who gave capitalists its impersonal, rational, and materialistic qualities. But Puritanism did help discipline the worker to the near of the life, to overcome the great difficulty of adapting worker to the technical and disciplinary requirement and of capitalists. The worker had to be inspired with the desire to get ahead in the world though capitalist idea. The desire for gain instead for being an inborn trait of human nature had to be deliberately inculcated in order that capitalism might flourish.
The earlier members of the German Historical School promoted reached its extreme in the writings of Sombart. By 1933, Sombart had become a full-fledged supporter of the Nazi philosophy. Germany under Hitler, he thought, was the new, dynamic system that would overcome capitalist decadence. He qualified racism and nationalism as welcome alternative to the debilitated society that had been vanquished. For us there is only one aim, which is Germany. For the sake of the Germany greatness, power, and glory, we will gladly sacrifice every theory and every principle, whether it bears a liberal or any other stand.